Welcome to Mystic Echoes, where the darkest corners of history whisper their secrets. I'm Wind, your guide through the shadows. Today, we're stepping into a nightmare that'll haunt your dreams: the Blade from London. In 1888, Jack the Ripper vanished from London's blood-stained streets like a ghost. But what if he didn't stop? What if he sailed across the Atlantic, his blade thirsting for new prey in New York? In 1891, a butchered body in a rotting hotel sent shockwaves through America. Was this Jack's return? Stay with me as we unravel this terrifying unsolved case, if you're brave enough. Picture the Lower East Side, Manhattan, 1891, a festering wound of a place where hope was a stranger. Narrow streets stank of decay, drunks slumped in doorways, and desperate women sold themselves to survive. On April 23, at the East River Hotel, a crumbling flophouse crawling with misery, a woman entered room 31 with a shadowy figure. Her name was Carrie Brown, nicknamed Old Shakespeare for her love of reciting plays. That night, her final act began. The next morning, a hotel worker knocked. Silence. He pushed the door open and froze, his scream echoing down the hall. Carrie lay sprawled on the bed, her throat crushed, purple bruises clawing into her flesh like a strangler's signature. But the real terror was below. Her body was ripped apart, slashed with deep, precise cuts that looked almost surgical. Some whispered her organs were gone, carved out like a butcher's prize, though the police stayed silent. A bloody knife rested beside her, its blade crusted with crimson, mocking the living. New York erupted in fear. Headlines blared, "Jack the Ripper strikes again." Just 3 years after London's reign of terror, this killing felt too familiar, too savage. Was this the Blade from Whitechapel, carried across the sea? Or a new horror born on American soil? The police moved fast. Their suspect? Ameer Ben Ali, known as Frenchy, an Algerian drifter lurking near the hotel that night. Blood stained his shirt and hands, and for the cops, that was all they needed. Frenchy was shackled, dragged off, and charged with Carrie's murder. Case closed, or so they thought. Frenchy insisted he was innocent, said he'd only been passing by, that the blood wasn't hers. But in 1891, justice didn't need proof. No DNA, no cameras, just a terrified city demanding a villain. The press crowned him the new Ripper, and the public howled for his blood. Frenchy was sentenced to life, locked away in a cold cell. But the story doesn't end there. 11 years later, something strange happened. Frenchy walked free. Why? Whispers grew that the blood on him might have been planted, maybe by desperate cops, maybe by someone else hiding in plain sight. If Frenchy didn't wield that blade, then who did? Who turned room 31 into a slaughterhouse and slipped back into the night? Let's rewind to London, 1888. Jack the Ripper, a name that still sends shivers down spines, carved his way through Whitechapel. At least 5 women, all prostitutes, fell to his blade, their bodies slashed and gutted in a frenzy of precision and madness. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished. No arrest. No trace. The fog swallowed him whole. But what if that wasn't the end? What if Jack didn't stop, but simply moved? Imagine this: a lone ship crossing the Atlantic in the dead of night. Waves crash against its hull as a storm rages. On deck, a figure stands silent, his coat flapping in the wind, a blade hidden beneath the folds. 3,000 miles from London, he steps onto American soil, New York, 1891. Carrie Brown's murder wasn't the only one. In New Jersey, a woman's body washed up on the Hudson, her torso ripped open. In San Francisco, 2 more turned up, their throats slit and bellies carved. Each crime echoed Jack's style: brutal, methodical, taunting. But here's where it twists. Some say these were copycats, killers inspired by Jack's legend, feeding off the headlines. Others argue it was him, slipping through cities like a phantom, mocking the law with every cut. And then there's H. Holmes, the devil behind Chicago's murder castle. He was in America then, a master of death with a taste for dissection. His timeline fits. His cruelty matches. Could Holmes have been Jack, trading London's fog for America's chaos? Or is it just a coincidence too dark to ignore? No letters arrived in New York, no taunting notes like London's dear boss. But the silence was worse. It left room for fear to fester, for imaginations to run wild. Was Jack watching from the shadows, planning his next move? Or had America birthed its own monster, sharper and colder than even he? More than 130 years have passed since that bloody night in room 31, but the mystery of Carrie Brown's murder clings like damp rot. No one knows if Jack the Ripper truly crossed the ocean. Frenchy lived out his days a broken man, freed but forever stained by doubt. The police buried the case, their files riddled with holes, a hurried end to a story they couldn't finish. But here's what keeps me up at night: whoever did this might have walked free. Steps out of that hotel, blood still warm on his hands. The city hums around him, carts rattling, voices shouting, and he melts into it. No one notices the blade tucked under his coat, the faint smirk on his lips. He could have boarded a train, vanished into the frontier, or stayed right there, hiding among the masses. Maybe he struck again, in some forgotten town, leaving bodies the world never tied to him. Or maybe he stopped, savoring the chaos he'd sown, watching New York tremble. The evidence is dust now, no DNA, no witnesses left. The knife from room 31? Lost to time. Some still swear it was Jack, his final encore on a new stage. Others point to a local fiend, a nameless predator born of America's underbelly. Me? I think the truth is worse, we'll never know. That blade, whether from London or forged here, took its secrets to the grave, leaving us with echoes of terror that won't fade. So, what do you think, listeners of Mystic Echoes? Was this Jack's shadow stretching across the sea, or a new nightmare wearing his mask? Drop your thoughts below. At Mystic Echoes, we don't just chase stories, we hunt the ghosts that linger in them. If this dive into the dark hooked you, smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Next week, Wynn's bringing you a case even more twisted. See you in the shadows, if you dare.